Hark, it's an 87th Precinct bonus episode, and you've already heard the sound of Stevo huffing his book, presumably, if I've faded this correctly against the music. No, well, there you go, he's still doing it for you. So, yes, we've looked at the book Like Love. It was the 16th novel in the 87th Precinct series from the latter part of 1962. The tale of romantic woes, explosions, amateur filmmaking, and badly handled suicide talk-down attempts. So, as usual, the first thing we're going to do in our bonus episode is have a look at the covers of our book. And seeing as Stevo's hoot has been rammed into his, he can tell us what he's got there.
Well, it's a...
pictures to follow.
Yeah, it's a picture of a lady's leg.
A lady's leg.
With,
presumably attached to a lady at some point.
With some hands and a garter belt.
A garter belt? That could be pertinent to the plot.
Indeed, yeah. When I saw the cover for this and started reading it, and I was like, what the hell has that got to do with anything? And then obviously, when you get right to the end of the book, you realise. But yeah, it's kind of an Emmanuel kind of era image.
Yeah, it's sort of gone... Early pulp stuff was all painted and drawn stuff, and then some of the later pulp stuff, of which this reminds me, becomes photographic. And as a result, not quite as alluring. It's a bit more sort of stark and brightly lit, like those Emmanuel films. It's a pan edition, isn't it, that you've got?
It is. It's the 1976 pan, and it cost me £2.50 from the scribble inside this. Or £250. I can't remember which. But
well, do you think you'd remember whether you'd spent £250 on a book? I don't know. It might. Your finances might support that lifestyle.
I was desperate to finish the collection.
You saw that garter belt on the cover.
The smell is of a medium smell.
Medium. Okay. So yeah, well, I've also got a pan edition, and I'll just go next with mine. Mine doesn't have a garter belt on the front. Mine's the 1980 third edition in the pan, and it cost me £1. But the cover of mine has a reproduction of the crime scene drawing that's featured in the book. Oof. And in an evidence bag on top of it is a horrible pair of red panties with black lace around them.
Oof. Can I have a look?
A little tag on it, which I'll pass it over in a second, Steve. Sorry. But the police department evidence tag has been filled out to say that it was found by Detective Cotton Hawes in the presence of Patrolman Robert Gennaro.
Oh, so his brother.
Yeah, presumably. So clearly the art department's tried to go for Dick Gennaro there, didn't know his first name and just called him Robert, even though I don't think he's in that scene at all.
Even though Dick is clearly short for Richard. That's a bit strange, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't really know. Mine's fairly... It's got an alright odour for a 1980 paperback, sorry. I'll pass that to Stevo to compare, see whether...
Yours is a bit more beaten up than mine. Mine's
yours is more
very, very good condition.
Well, for £250,
you'd expect it.
You know, you get what you pay for.
And Morgan, you've got...
it's just the
Odorless.
Standard 2005 Orion Edition.
What's the cover on that then?
It appears to be a broken gargoyle.
Oh, presumably then that's suggesting that the building that she was stood on, the girl Blanche in the first sequence, knocked a gargoyle off. Does she? I don't think she does that, does she?
I don't think she particularly does.
I think there is a mention of...
There's a mention of a gargoyle, definitely.
The one passing mention. Well, does that suggest that the person who designed the art for that book got as far as page 1?
I think so, yeah. And they're like, yep, that'll do.
Yeah. Next.
Yeah, so that's it, yeah. The ledger was perhaps a foot wide, running around the 12th floor, broken at the building's corner by one of those grotesque gargoyles which adorned many of the city's older structures. Yeah. The girl was unaware of the grinning stone head, unaware of the detective's yada yada yada. Blonde hair whipping over her shoulders. We can see some blonde hair in there. Some blood. So it's like, I think they got up to page 2 actually.
So you know, there was me mocking them for only looking at page 1.
Never let it be said that they're not doing a thorough job
of getting possibly 250 words into the book before going. Yeah, that'll do. What's the dedication in that one, Morgan?
It's to Dragika. It's got a little bit. It's not just the standard one. So before 1995, it was only Like Love. Then I met my wife Dragika.
Oh, that's sweet. The original dedication in my edition, and presumably Stevo's as well, is the book is for Vivian and Jack Ferran. And I could find out a little bit about them, not much, but Jack Ferran himself was a native New Yorker about the same age as Evan Hunter, Ed McBain, who was a Broadway producer and who also produced the film Fuzz in 1972.
Ah.
And he also produced the US version, which I think might be the original version, of the TV programme Call My Bluff. Memories of Call My Bluff. I wonder if it was like our version of Call My Bluff.
I would hope so.
I think ours presumably was based on American.
Well, Bob.
I mean, maybe this is a huge memory. Maybe there's millions and millions of people who have a Call My Bluff memory, but not all of them will have Bob Holness, Alan Corran, and Sandy Toksvig as their main people they recollect.
Alan Corran syndicated throughout the world for his quips.
So you're left in a Alan Corran thought moment there.
And Alan Corran... That sounds like a progressive rock band.
The Alan Corran thought moment.
They'd probably be supporting the Alan Parsons project.
So only bands with Van in the name can support each other,
Yeah.
or play with each other, and only bands with
Alan.
in their name.
Got to have a system, haven't you?
Yeah. If no one's listened to the main episode, that won't make any sense.
It
It
doesn't
barely
make much
makes sense as it is. Anyway. Yes, but Vivian Ferran was an actress, but I think a stage actress, therefore not many credits to find online, really. So those are the editions we've got. I did, when it was Valentine's Day on the Twitter feed, I found loads of the covers and put them up online for Like Love, as I think it's the only book in the series that's got the word love in the title.
Oh.
And there is quite a variety of them, but I think quite a lot feature garter belts or panties, which makes them, I don't want to say embarrassing to read in public, but if people don't know what the books are, then it's a bit of a weird thing, especially as it's a really horrible pair of pants. Yeah, of all the colours you could choose, that colour red with that black lace trimming, not for me.
Yeah. I'll stick with me gargoyle.
Yeah, you'll be a sexy gargoyle. So I put the call out for some listener questions, and I received some. And one that I did receive was, he said, clearing my throat to read it properly, was not written on the piece of paper I have in my hand. Oh, that one is said. This was from one of our Twitter followers, which is George Kelly, who you can find at gkellyfiction, who himself is a crime and mystery writer in London. And he asks, did McBain envisage the 87th Precinct series ending? Did he have a final book plotted out? Now, I did a bit of research. Can you imagine this? First and foremost, can you imagine the series ending? Had he not died, would he have carried on writing? What's your instinct?
My instinct would be that he didn't have a plan for it to end and was just carrying on.
Wrote them as and when?
Yeah, because, you know, I never had the feeling that there was an end in sight, because they've not really got any older, have they, particularly?
Yeah, he's
and therefore, it's not as though they're all going to reach retirement age,
that's
or
it. He's
not
not
going to
gonna-
kill them all off. I never thought, so.
Not going to have old man Karela.
Coming back for one last case before retirement.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Pete Burns must be about 90 years old in like.
Oh, he's
the
already
last ones.
already ancient. If you follow the timeline by this point, only 16 books.
Well, he's
into
like
the series.
he's permanently in his 50s, isn't he?
Yeah.
The others age a little bit. I don't think he ages a day, really. But yeah, so nah.
No.
I don't. I
Well-
never got that feeling anyway.
No, and the evidence sort of supports that, I suppose, as much as there is really. In terms of what was left unpublished, I don't think there was much at all. He worked constantly even through most of his illness. I think he adjusted. He used to work like 10 hours a day, and he eventually knocked it down to 8 hours a day as a concession to having, cancer of the larynx or whatever. He sort of knocked a couple of hours off his working day. But you can find a listing of what's in the archive you can access in Boston, the Howard Gottlieb archive, which I would love to go and explore, but I think that only lists a couple of unpublished things, and they're not novels. The one that is known, the book that is known he was working on was one called Becker in Jeopardy. He'd written a book called Alice in Jeopardy, which was published, and he was working on one called Becker in Jeopardy, and his plan was to publish a series of some so-and-so in Jeopardy novels going through the alphabet. So he hadn't planned to stop writing at any point, and he was quite old by the time he started those ones. But Becker in Jeopardy was unfinished, and there was some talk of getting someone to finish it. Lawrence Block was asked, and he would have...
Lawrence Block, but you could imagine, would do it. But having followed him on Twitter for a while, I know of his opinion of people finishing off other people's unpublished works.
Yeah, I've read a couple of different things. He sort of said some things are all right, collaborations are all right, but perhaps finishing things off, But that never came to pass, even though there was like some Amazon listings for the book as if it was going to be published, but it never has been. There was also rumours of an 87th Precinct story called Exit. People were saying that existed and that was finished and ready to publish. But as far as I can tell, it was just rumours. There's not been any evidence for that. And so I think by the time he died, he wasn't doing... he didn't have 3 or 4 books on the go at any one time. I think he was working on one at a time, and the one he was working on was Becker in Jeopardy. So I would have assumed he would have come back to the 87th Precinct, but who knows? So, yeah, he definitely wasn't going to cap it off. It didn't even start, really. It was like suddenly we were just looking at a slice of these cops' lives. It wasn't like he came in fresh from the academy, ... anything like that.
Yeah, it's not like something like the Martin Beck series, which definitely charts kind of has a definite start and finish point, even though it is police procedural. It's would sort of take.
They had the arc figured out before it even started.
There was none of that with the 87
No.
Precinct, so I can't imagine he would have planned any kind of end point for it.
And it's always weird when a long-running series, does end. Agatha Christie's Curtain, Poirot's Last Case, was published posthumously, and it's really weird. And I mean, she wrote it, but if anyone's read it or seen any of the adaptations,
yeah, I saw it very recently, and it was so unbelievable.
It's
I
such a
couldn't
weird way to
believe
treat
it was
the character,
based on the book, but yeah.
I wonder whether if she'd have been able to, she might not have had it published. But that's the nature of things. It is weird when long-running series.
Yeah.
It's curious how he was right. His final book was a mystery about Boris Becker, though, isn't it? That's quite a strange...
Boris Becker in Jeopardy.
It's quite a strange... So perhaps he was going to do tennis-themed...
Yeah.
But there was never any hint...
Nastasi in Jeopardy.
There's never any hint at any point in the series that he wanted to wrap it. So some writers of a long-running series, they'll sort of do one. There'll be an entry in the series where it seems like they're trying to leave it as a possible end point, and then a few years later, it's like, okay, I'll write another one. There's none of those, are there? It's not like L. Frank Baum trying to finish the Oz series after the 4th book, and then the money runs a bit low, and it's like, anyway, so here's another one.
Yeah, and Sherlock Holmes as well, of course.
Yeah.
That was popular demand, wasn't it, really, that brought him back?
Yeah.
And the Philip Marlowe books as well. I mean, the Long Goodbye was definitely meant to be the last one, and then you get Payback and Poodle Springs. But there's no indication, I think, at any point that he's got tired of the series and is trying to kind of wrap it up.
I think the fact that he was always writing other stuff and he just used to come back to it more or less regularly, depending on which point of his writing career he was in. Because sometimes it was very much centre stage for him, and then other times, well, it's probably about time I did another 87th. You know what I mean?
Yeah, presumably he wrote them in the later stages when he had the idea to write about, or when something triggered it. And obviously there's a lot of things going on in the early part of the 21st century that were triggering ideas. The rise of terrorism, etc., was something new for them to deal with. Terrorism happening in cities and things like that. But if you wanted to be overly analytical, you could look at Fiddlers and say, well, there's characters and things in there that reflect his failing health and his illness and stuff like that. But I don't think he would have ever had a plan to cap it off.
No,
potentially, certainly not at this stage in which they were left. Anyway. So anyway, that's the evidence and our answer to that question. Got some other questions. Oh, a good question from Ollie, who is at WhatMeWorry on Twitter. And it was a question he was saying about wanting to read more female crime writers and asking us about what are our favourite female crime writers. And it's been something that's been on my mind because I haven't read that many female crime writers.
Snap. I've never read any Val McDermid, but
I'd love to read some Val McDermid.
they're supposed to be quite gruesome, I think, aren't they? From what I understand.
So I gather, yeah.
Yeah, a bit more, grisly crimes.
I got these Marjorie Allingham books on my shelf now. I've got about 5 of those I bought second-hand recently, and a couple of Patricia Highsmith, which is supposed to be very, very good.
Oh, I've always wanted to read Patricia Highsmith, but I haven't delved in yet. Marjorie Allingham I've read a little bit of. I seem to recall them being pretty fun, sort of, kind of almost sort of more satirical than strictly just mystery novels.
Yeah, so
there's a good sort of like Huxleyan kind of social satire element to them, which is great.
That's worth looking forward to.
Well, your Martin Beck's obviously co-written.
Yes,
absolutely.
And they're excellent.
Fantastic. There's another female crime writer who I read a little while ago, and
I read a Margaret Miller once.
That's who I was thinking of.
Yeah, that was totally. I can't even. All I remember is it was totally insane. This book, and it was just like. Oh my! It was about somebody locked in a room or something. What on earth's it called?
Another one. It's got someone who's like
Somebody...
bricked up in a. Because I've read one Margaret Miller book and I thought it was excellent.
Yeah, same here. Yeah, it was one of those crime masterworks. So yeah, Margaret Miller might be somebody worth
definitely one
checking
to
out.
investigate further. Yeah.
Because the one I've mainly read is Agatha Christie and mainly the Poirot stories.
What about Dorothy L. Sayers as well?
Not read any Dorothy L. Sayers.
They're supposed to be very good, I think. But probably a lot of these, you're kind of overwhelmed about how many there is to read, and you're just like,
Yeah, and you tend to fall back on the things you feel you can rely on.
Yeah.
So when you've got a series like the Ed McBain stuff, obviously he is someone my eyes constantly open for, and I've started reading the Lawrence Block stuff as well, and it's so enjoyable. It's like, I want that stuff.
That is the thing with crime fiction. There's so many things you can just latch onto, and many people have long careers and are very prolific, so you just once kind of get into one of Rex Stout's Nero Wolfe books, and then you sort of, that takes up your next 30 years. And
But yes, I'm extremely open to suggestions, as I'm sure all our listeners would be interested in these things. So if you've got any ideas about female crime writers, then do share it with us on our Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or email us or whatever, because it's really interesting, and it's nice to get names to look out for and get on your shelves ready to be read. So there you go. Right. Okay. Checking my details here. Checking my pieces of paper. Mm-hmm. Oh, we had a question sent in whilst we were recording. This is the kind of bleeding edge technology we're operating with here. And the question is from Jim Goodwin on Twitter. So at Jim_Goodwin. Hello, James. And it is a question akin to one we've been asked a few times, and one that we've sort of skirted around actually answering. And because I don't think there is an answer, which is about who's the best on-screen karela. And if we were casting a series, who would we choose for each role? And this keeps cropping up over and over again. And if you sort of look at our Twitter feed, you'll see that occasionally we have little spurts of people suggesting things who they think could be good for Steve Carella or characters within the series. In terms of the on-screen karelas that do exist, the majority that I've found, I did put... There is a blog post on our blog about it where I've listed them all, not attempted to rank them at all. And that takes in Michael Higgins, Robert Bray, Robert Loggia, Robert Lansing, Tatsuya Nakadi, Jean-Louis Trintignant. I can't do that. Should have read it first.
He was the best, wasn't he?
He was good.
Jean-Louis Trintignant.
Jean-Louis Trintignant. Burt Reynolds. Vinod Khanna,
Burt Reynolds,
Donald Sutherland, Joseph Abraham, Jiri Bartoshka, Randy Quaid, and Dale Midkiff.
You can imagine Donald Sutherland being quite good.
Yeah, well, I look forward to actually seeing the film that...
I'm looking forward to that other guy cropping up again. About Boris Becker, did he ever play him?
Boris Becker. The pictures I've found of the various Carellas that I've put on the blog post from a little while back they're all pictures of these actors as Carella, not just random pictures. But the one of Burt Reynolds he's in a locker room with his top off and his moustache out. He's not had a moustacheectomy.
No.
In fact, he must have said looks like a human moustache, the amount of hair on his body.
He probably just refused to get rid of the moustache.
I imagine that was in his contract that whatever happens, the tash stays.
Yeah. It's... I don't know what to think about the film Fuzz. We've not watched it yet, and it's a while till we get to the book, and it's certainly the biggest production based on an 87th Precinct book, but...
And who's karela in that?
That's the Burt Reynolds one.
Oh, right, okay. I didn't
It's
know.
definitely going to be very daft, isn't it?
Very brilliant. What? Oh.
But
very
Ed McBain
brilliant.
did the screenplay for it, so we shall see.
It's funny, it was Fuzz with the mustachioed Burt Reynolds.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, fuzz, man fuzz all over his body.
Yeah.
A fuzzy man, if ever there was one.
We
Bert.
need the fuzziest actor going.
No, we leave the discussion of who to cast and who was the best to social media and things like that. It's so hard to say. I love Robert Lansing from the 87th Precinct TV series, but then he's the one I've watched the most. Even though the series itself isn't particularly phenomenal, it's good, but it's not got the grit of the books. Someone like Vinod Khanna, who I mentioned, doesn't really play karela. He plays the karela character in Inkar, which is a spin-off of High and Low, which is a spin-off of King's Ransom. So we're bending the rules as to what a karela is on screen, really. There, but he's brilliant as a Bollywood-type actor. You know, he's very charismatic and stuff. So fight it out amongst yourselves is always the answer to that one, isn't it?
And if we were casting it, we'd probably just cast some carry-on veteran anyway, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jim Dale is probably the only one left, isn't he? Yeah. That's the questions. We had some actual questions there from actual people.
Tremendous.
We'll maybe have
I hope
another
we've disappointed you appropriately.
I'm sure
We'll
will.
maybe have a bash at answering that question when we get to podcast number 40 odd, and we'll have watched as many versions as is going at that point.
I think we need to, we do need to get stuck into the evidence, although by our own rules we're sort of holding off until we get to the point at which these things occur.
Yeah.
And after the 87th Precinct TV series finishes, which it does in 1962, there's not much coming up. There's a few films, not all of which are easily got hold of. It's few and far between from here on in. Argue amongst yourselves, as I say. Anyway. Oh, well, there we go. Questions. I tell you what I did mention in the main podcast, and I did tease that we might talk about it. I mentioned something called true crime. This is... Stevo, would you like to tell the listeners what your concept of a podcast called True Crime?
Do we want to reveal that? Because
I don't know. Is this a teaser?
Somebody might steal,
But is this
steal our idea.
Is this like copyright, where if you fix it in a material form, you have the copyright on it?
That's it. And, we could always get the Hark legal team on it if anyone did...
The Hark
lawyers. Well, we're going to have a podcast. Well, we're going to do it as a feature. I don't know. Or we might not even bother doing it at all.
We'll work out the technical details.
But it's going to be of actual true crime that we're going to start off talking about actual crimes that have definitely happened around the world.
Yeah. There's a reason
involving steam engine, steamrollers, and nameless triplets.
Perhaps
and
the title
barons.
True Crime doesn't end in a question mark, but ends in an interrobang. True Crime Interrobang.
I think that would be good.
And again, if you've not listened to the main podcast, and you don't know what an interrobang is,
but I'm purposely keeping the cards close to my chest here because I don't want to let the cat out. Don't want to let the cat out the bag too much.
I think this is a winning format, which is going to make our fortunes.
Yeah, definitely.
So it'll be a true crime, but whether it's true in strictly sense of the word is
sense of the word
is perhaps something to be considered.
True crime, except in the sense of being factual.
Yeah, so they will be factually accurate crimes, but some of the events might have been altered ever so slightly.
I don't know when we'll find time to do this. It might fail miserably. I think we've probably repelled more people than we will have enticed with that sales pitch.
That was the purpose, though, the entire purpose of that. Because I don't want.
The ambition is.
I don't want its popularity to defeat it before it's got going.
Yeah, the ambition is to have a podcast that has no listeners but becomes the most successful podcast in the world.
I can't remember.
And the only way to do that is with true crime.
I can't remember the name of the cucumber baron who was crushed by the rock.
He was South American, wasn't he? He was Argentinian.
Miguel Miguel, somebody, wasn't he? I can't remember. But anyway, his name escapes me now.
Well, you'll do the research.
Yeah, well, of course, yeah. His name's immaterial, really, given he's dead.
So, yeah, hold on to your hats for that thing. Has anyone got any pressing matters to attend to here on this podcast now?
I need to go somewhere and take all my clothes off immediately.
It is very warm, isn't it?
It is.
So do you know what would be a good solution for being somewhere really warm? Going to somewhere like Croatia, which will be even warmer.
It will, but there'll be a delicious ocean one can jump in.
Delicious ocean. Salty.
Yum, yum, yum.
Don't mean for the purposes of drinking it. Deliciously refreshing.
Yes, this is the podcast that takes us up to the Hark summer break, which is literally a gap before the next episode, which is what we would have anyway, where Stevo is going to go and drink the Croatian Ocean. What's the ocean?
I might take
Mediterranean? I don't know.
Adriatic.
Adriatic? I don't know.
Adriatic, yeah.
Okay.
I might take a McBain with me to read whilst I'm away.
Seems like a plan.
Whereas I'm going to New York and I intend to travel as light as possible so that I can come back with loads of books.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so that's my plan. Okay, right, we're almost at half an hour. We've answered some questions, we've talked some mysterious rubbish. It's very, very hot. I'm sorry, everyone. We can't carry on much longer. Going to say goodbye now. Goodbye.
Where's he gone? Anyway, cheerio.
Very well.